How to get along well with a ghost. This is the pressing issue that Grace is currently facing. Of course. More importantly, this ghost has taken over her bed, although it's just a simple straw pallet, as a place for a young lady to rest and sleep. Grace has no intention of sharing it with anyone at all. Moreover, apart from that, this shameless ghost shows signs of further intruding into her life. It's just a bed. No need to be so particular. The ghost on the bed, perched on a bamboo umbrella, dressed in spotless white clothes, with skin even paler than the clothes, and a pair of almond-shaped eyes rippling with waves. Moreover, I don't mind sharing the bed with you. It's you who has been too polite and unwilling to do so, isn't it? Men and women should not be too intimate. Do you understand? Grace emphasized. I'm not a person, the ghost explained. Even if you're not a person, it's still not allowed. And can you stop casually mentioning that you're not a person like that? The ghost innocently shrugged. I'm just stating the truth. Then, changing posture on the bed, the ghost added, by the way, it's really boring lately. Go buy some storybooks for me to read. Read your sister, Grace exclaimed in frustration. When I found you, you weren't like this. Indeed, when she went to pay respects to her master's grave, she found a gentle, modest, and pitiable beautiful young man, not the arrogant young master in front of her now. And what about that he calls himself? When they first met, didn't he call himself this humble person? Why is the transition so natural? If I had been like this back then, would you have taken me back? Absolutely not. Exactly. Exactly whose head are you talking about? Grace stood with her hands on her hips, her face burning with anger. So are you saying that everything you told me back then was a lie? What about waiting for many years, and I being the first person to see you, and you losing your memory after death, wandering around the wilderness and graveyards, but remembering that I once saved you when you saw me, were all just made-up nonsense? It just so happened that Grace had been saved once. At that time, Grace went to the wild to collect herbs, got lost in the mountains, caught a fever from the rain, and eventually fainted by the roadside. In her delirium, it seemed that someone had applied cool compresses and fed her water. But when she woke up in the temple, the person was gone. She had always been grateful for this. And seeing the ghost with such an elegant demeanor and hearing his earnest words, she naively believed him. No. What? You mean? I didn't lie to you. The ghost pursed his lips, the faint sunlight outlining his figure, making his semi-transparent form even more ethereal. I truly don't remember who I am. Otherwise, why would I wander around that graveyard? It's just because I wanted to find out which grave is mine. Among the many people coming and going to pay respects, only you seemed familiar to me, and only you could see me. If I didn't follow you, who else could I follow? But you lied. I've already said, I couldn't have come back with you otherwise. A faint sense of helplessness and confusion permeated his calm tone. The ghost's almond-shaped eyes lowered, and he let out a soft chuckle, like a sigh falling silently. Filled with bitterness, Grace once again cursed her soft heart. All right, but just this once. Don't lie to me again, she sighed. I'll go buy you some storybooks, and you stay at home and don't run around, okay? As soon as the words left his mouth, the ghost immediately changed posture again, crossing his legs, and glanced at the umbrella with disdain. The melancholic aura from a moment ago vanished in an instant. Since you're buying, get me a new umbrella too. That day you didn't have anything on you, so I had to attach myself to this umbrella, but it's just too shabby. How could it match my elegant demeanor? I really can't stand looking at this umbrella anymore. Oh, and remember to go to Shangjingshuan to buy it. Their umbrellas have shoe embroidery on the surface and rosewood ribs, which barely. I'm just joking. You go and come back soon. No need to see you off. Grace certainly didn't buy the umbrella. Come on. Those treasures would probably cost more than she's worth. But storybooks. She loved those herself. So bringing a few extra was no trouble at all. As soon as she got back, the spirit dove right into the storybooks with relish. So absorbed that he didn't even notice when Grace quietly moved the bed to the side. Come to think of it, this spirit, despite having a bit of a temperamental young master vibe, was actually quite easy to take care of. He didn't need any grains or food to survive, just a regular dusting of that umbrella was all it took. Grace would occasionally grumble about him, but sometimes she was secretly glad. After all, ever since her master passed away, she had been living alone. It wasn't loneliness. Exactly, but after being by herself for so long, she often found herself wishing for someone to talk to, and the spirit seemed to have genuinely good upbringing in his past life. Besides reading storybooks, he would also write poetry and paint in his spare time. Grace didn't quite understand the poetry, but she could tell the paintings were truly impressive. With just a few light strokes and gentle shading, the subjects he painted, whether pavilions, landscapes, or birds and beasts, came vividly to life on the paper. And when he painted, the spirit would often be silent for hours. It had to be admitted that he had a very handsome and refined appearance. When he wasn't speaking, he looked every bit the elegant and cultured young gentleman, but there was no way Grace would ever tell the spirit that to his face. He was already arrogant enough as it was. If she told him, he'd be insufferable. So, living here all by yourself, aren't you scared? The spirit, having just finished a painting and blown on it lightly, started chatting away contentedly. I'm used to it. Scared? This was my master's place. Why would I be scared? Besides, it's nice and quiet. Grace lived in a small county. Her master had been the most famous doctor in the county. Although she hadn't learned much medicine, she could make a living by collecting herbs from the mountains each season and selling them to the county's traditional Chinese medicine clinic. Because she always stayed in that thatched cottage, Grace rarely saw anyone. Did you live like this when your master was alive? Grace thought for a moment. Probably a few more patients would come for consultations. Then your life must be so boring. No. It's not. Still saying it's not. The spirit raised an eyebrow, scoffing. Since I'm in a good mood, how about I take you out for some fun? Is there anything stranger than going out for fun with a ghost? But whether it was strange or not, Grace was already on her way to the nearby large town, holding the umbrella. The spirit was clearly much more familiar with such places and eagerly began to introduce everything along the way. From the calligraphy and painting academy to the signature dishes of the largest restaurant in town, his clear and detailed memory made Grace extremely suspicious about the authenticity of his amnesia. How could I, a gentleman, lie? I just have a good memory for certain things. Just eating, drinking, and having fun. I'm taking you out. Can't you show a little more respect to me, a gentleman? All right. The dishes were served, and they were indeed delicacies. The spirit sat leisurely beside her, smiling as he watched Grace eat. For a moment, as he fanned himself, his expression turned a bit nostalgic and his voice became ethereal. If you like it, I can take you around all the nearby cities. What was he reminiscing about? Grace scolded herself for being nosy, but she still felt a bit uneasy inside. She pursed her lips and couldn't help but say, speaking of which, don't you want to know who you are? Yes. The spirit nodded after a pause, as if making up her mind. Grace said, if it's just in that cemetery, I might be able to help you. Indeed, the cemetery wasn't large, and there weren't many graves. If the spirit came from a family of his stature, there would likely be even fewer. A search might just turn up something. Ha! The spirit was taken aback for a moment, then lowered his head and his voice softened. Actually, I'm not that eager to know. I don't know why, but I feel it won't be a good memory. But, it was the first time Grace had seen the spirit like this. She smiled, her eyes twinkling as she looked at him. Don't worry, no matter what the memories are, I won't hate you. Time seemed to stand still for a few moments. The spirit quietly turned his face away. I'm not afraid you'll hate me. Ah. I'm just worried that if I died in an undignified way, it would be embarrassing. Hey, don't leave. I was just joking. Don't take it seriously. Grace still took the spirit to the cemetery. After excluding the graves of children who died young, women, and elderly people who had lived long lives, there were only a few graves left. Glancing at the list, Grace felt it wouldn't be too difficult to visit each household and ask. So she had the spirit draw a portrait of herself. At first, he drew her with a radiant glow, like a celestial being descending to earth. But Grace rejected it without hesitation. Only then did he obediently draw another one, using a bronze mirror as a reference, unfortunately. After asking several households, they all gave negative answers. The spirit didn't seem too bothered, but Grace felt a bit discouraged. Pfft, why are you so upset? It's normal that you can't find anything. Think about it. I've been in that cemetery for so long and haven't run into anyone. If you found someone just by asking, I'd be the one feeling ripped off. What kind of logic is that? Well, a young lady should smile more. If you keep being expressionless or frowning all day, how are you ever going to get married? The spirit patted Grace's shoulder airily. Come on. As a reward for helping me, I'll draw a portrait for you. Grace had never had a portrait drawn of herself before. After hesitating for a moment, she agreed the artist was truly skilled. In less than an hour, a half-length portrait was mostly finished. In the portrait, Grace was wearing her usual coarse cotton dress, with her long, black hair cascading over her shoulders. She had a slight dimple on her cheek, and her bright eyes were curved like crescent moons. Anyone who saw it would forget the mundane and feel as if a spring breeze had brushed their face. Which girl doesn't love to look pretty? Grace held the portrait and giggled foolishly for a long time. It wasn't until the spirit helplessly took the paper from her hands that she came to her senses. She quickly snatched it back and stuffed it into her bosom. By the way, were you a painter in your past life? How should I remember? Grace thought for a moment. But your drawing is really good. I don't think I was. Ha! I must have drawn myself so much that I made you look so beautiful. I couldn't just draw portraits for anyone. Could you be a little more modest? Humph. What's that? Grace looked at the spirit, who was sitting arrogantly on the windowsill, fanning himself with a folding fan he had somehow acquired, looking as if he was the unparalleled master of the world. She couldn't help but laugh. All right, I'll go and ask for you again. This time, she visited two prominent families in the west of the town, the House of Lu and the House of Zhao. After much persuasion, she finally found someone willing to see her. But unfortunately, showing the portrait still yielded negative answers. By the time she returned, it was already dark. She bought a bowl of wontons from a roadside stall, swallowing them while trying not to feel discouraged. Otherwise the spirit would definitely comment on her again. However, she had somehow gotten used to this. Every night when she came home, the spirit would ask her a few questions or scold her a bit. Although she was still alone at home, she no longer felt lonely or desolate thinking this. Grace reached into her bosom again to touch the portrait given to her, but as soon as she touched it, she realized something was wrong. The portrait was gone. Grace immediately searched around her, but she couldn't find it anywhere. It must have been lost on the way. The more she thought about it, the more anxious she became. Grace left her unfinished wontons and began to search along the way. It was already completely dark, and finding a thin piece of paper was not an easy task, especially since Grace was too anxious to calm down and search properly. If someone picked up the drawing, that would be fine, but if it was carelessly thrown on the roadside and trampled on, the portrait would probably be ruined. The night grew deeper and deeper, and Grace was still at a loss. She sighed, hesitating whether to go back, when suddenly she saw two drunk men flash by on the roadside. Hey, there's a girl over there. She looks pretty good, one said. Haha, girl, what are you doing out here in the middle of the night? How about we take you home? The other one joked. Grace quickly tried to run, but her arm was suddenly grabbed. She had encountered situations like this before and quickly calmed down, thinking fast about what to do. A ghost, the two men shouted, looking behind Grace. They immediately let go of her and scrambled away. Grace turned around and saw a terrifying face with blue skin and fangs in her line of sight. She took a step back in fright, and then saw the face being removed to reveal a fair and handsome visage. Why are you coming back so late? The spirit demanded. Grace started without giving Grace a chance to explain. The spirit scolded. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is for a young lady to be out so late at night? If I hadn't come just in time, do you have any idea what could have happened? Feeling guilty, Grace let the spirit berate her. When his anger had subsided a bit, she quietly said, The painting. What painting? The spirit asked. The one you drew for me. I lost it. Ha! The spirit was taken aback. You came back so late. Because you were looking for the painting. Grace nodded. Fool. The spirit took a deep breath and scolded even more fiercely. It's just a painting. I can draw you as many as you want. Anytime. And you risked coming home so late at night for this. Grace. Don't be like that. It was your painting after all. Still talking back. Grace felt weak. Even her master had never scolded her like this. Come to think of it, how did this guy get so good at scolding people? Let's go back. The spirit said. Okay. And stop asking about that. The spirit added. The spirit paused. I'm not that obsessed with my past. If I don't know something, it's better to just not know. Okay. Can you at least react a bit more? The spirit asked. Grace caught up. Her smile almost uncontrollable. Got it. Grace felt like she really was taking care of a master. But what was even sadder was that she was doing it quite willingly. Not only did she have to serve and do things for him, but she also had to endure his scolding. Was she a masochist? Grace thought despairingly. But what was even more desperate was that she realized the money in her purse was running out. Usually, the money she earned from selling herbs each season was enough to last her for a while with some left over. But ever since she started taking care of the spirit, she had to buy storybooks every now and then, and also cater to his various hobbies like playing musical instruments, playing chess, painting, and calligraphy. Soon, Grace's money was almost gone, and she had even used up some of her emergency savings. Grace felt she couldn't go on like this. At the very least, she needed to go to the mountains to collect herbs again, having made up her mind. Grace told the spirit and set off early with her herb basket. She lived far from the town but close to the forest. Since she had walked these paths since childhood, she was very familiar with the mountain trails. It didn't take long for her to find a place to collect herbs. Grace rarely came at this time because herbs have a growth cycle, and this was not the best season for collecting them. But she had no choice. She apologized quietly before picking the herbs that were not yet fully grown. She worked until almost sunset. And her basket was only half full. Grace thought it was enough and decided to go down the mountain. Thud. She really didn't expect to fall into a trap on a path she knew so well. Grace paused for a while before realizing she had fallen into a large pit. Fortunately, the soil at the bottom of the pit was soft, so she wasn't seriously hurt, just a bit scraped. But judging by the height, it would be really hard for her to climb out by herself. After struggling for a bit, Grace decided to stay and wait for the person who set the trap to come and rescue her the next day. But, thinking of the spirit at home, Grace felt a bit of a headache. Actually, she didn't feel that it was very dangerous. After being alone for so long, she had encountered all kinds of dangers. With quick thinking and a bit of luck, she had mostly gotten through them safely. Life itself is full of risks. It's impossible to live without any danger. Instead, it was this scolding and worrying that felt a bit unnatural to her. It was as if she had returned to her childhood, when she was disciplined, scolded for doing wrong, and worried about. Though this feeling wasn't actually bad either, Grace buried her head in her knees and quietly thought of her master, the person who had raised her for years and was the only one who truly cared about her. How long had it been since she was last scolded like this? If only the spirit were not just a spirit, Grace thought. Raising her head to look at the starlight outside the pit, she sighed again, only to meet a pair of almond-shaped eyes brighter than the stars. Why aren't you scolding me this time? It's not that you don't want to come back. Why would I scold you? I didn't expect you to actually be reasonable. When has the gentleman ever been unreasonable? Grace silently turned her face away. Spirit. Forget it. Who would have thought I'm so kind-hearted? He glanced disdainfully at the pit and hovered in midair. Since you can't get out, I'll stoop to keep you company for the night. Grace was genuinely stunned. What's wrong? Are you saying you don't want me to? No. Of course not. How could she not want company? It was just a bit unusual. She had thought that once he knew she was not in danger, he would simply float away. She never expected that he would stay here with her. Gratitude, emotion, and some indescribable feelings welled up inside her. What do you want to do? The spirit asked her. Grace shook her head. There's no need to do anything. I'm just happy that you're willing to stay here with me. All right, then I'll play the flute. the spirit said, producing a bamboo flute from somewhere and bringing it to his lips. Beginning to play softly, the flute music rang out melodiously. Like the clear flow of a mountain stream, Grace leaned back in the pit. Closing her eyes to listen, she didn't know how much time had passed when rain began to patter down. Grace quickly opened her eyes. But she was completely dry. Looking up, she saw a large leaf shading her head, with rainwater flowing down the veins of the leaf, avoiding her completely. What are you looking at? Since I'm here, I can't just let you get sick in the rain, the spirit said. Putting down the flute and huffing, Grace couldn't help but smile. The night mist was cold, and the rain was cool, but she felt warm and nostalgic under that leaf. The rain is so loud. And you won't be able to sleep anyway. Let's chat about something. The spirit tilted his head. Why did you come to collect herbs? How else am I supposed to make money to support myself? The spirit was puzzled. Can you really make money from these weeds? These are medicinal herbs. Why don't you think of a safer way to make money? Something more suitable for a young lady. I don't know how. TSK. The spirit twirled his fan handle. The gentleman, have a solution. What kind of solution could it be? It turned out to be just a bad idea, didn't it? Grace muttered to herself while nervously holding the painting that the spirit claimed could be sold for money. The clerk at the art and calligraphy shop glanced at her shabby clothes and didn't even bother to look at her properly. He coldly asked in a routine manner, "What do you want to buy?" "No, I'm here to sell a painting." "Ha, whose painting?" Did you paint it yourself?" "Little girl." "No, well, just take a look and you'll know." Grace steeled herself and abruptly unrolled the painting. "Tell me how much this painting is worth." The clerk's initial disdainful expression changed slightly when he saw what was depicted in the painting. "This? Who painted this?" Grace was taken aback. I can't say." "It doesn't matter if you can't say. I'll buy it. 5 taels of silver. How about that?" 5 taels. Think it's too little. Then make it 10 taels. "Miss, the painting is good, but it has no signature or seal. Offering this price is already quite generous. 10 taels of silver. A painting for 10 taels of silver. 10 taels of silver." Grace was still in a daze when she returned with the silver. Just one painting, which was worth half a year's earnings from selling herbs. And she had watched the spirit paint it in just over an hour. So, is that guy actually a walking treasure trove? "Miss, can you watch where you're going?" Sorry." Grace quickly apologized before she could leave. She was suddenly stopped by a Taoist priest. The priest had a face full of white beard and looked like he had an air of immortality. "Young lady, have you recently encountered anything unnatural?" Grace's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean?" "The girl has a dark cloud over her forehead and an aura of bad luck. It's not a good sign. You must have encountered something you shouldn't have. And judging by the shape, it's probably a ghost that has long since passed away." Grace forced a smile. "That's impossible." The priest calculated with his fingers. In the 3rd year of the Pingqing era, the treacherous Su Exin, who harmed 10,000 people, was beaten to death in a mass grave. The grudge he carried has not been resolved. And he cannot be reborn. "You, don't run away, young lady. I'm not done yet." Without a word, Grace turned around and left. "How was my painting?" Grace, still shaken, took out the silver. The spirit glanced at it and said discontentedly, "Just this much. The shopkeeper is really unreasonable. This is my..." "Hey, what's wrong with you?" Nothing. Grace rubbed her face, trying to look normal. "I ran too fast and couldn't catch my breath." "Why did you run so fast?" "I wanted to come back early." The spirit hummed and a smile curled at the corner of his lips. "It's good that you know to come back early." But Grace was already preoccupied. Of course she knew about Su Exin. He was a notorious traitor, a name that everyone cursed a few years ago. Even now, when people mention his name, they mostly grit their teeth in hatred. When children were naughty, adults would use Su Exin to scare them, saying that if they didn't behave, Su Exin would come out of hell and eat them. In short, Su Exin was depicted as a terrifying monster with blue face and fangs, who would eat human flesh and drink human blood. But compared to those paintings used to denounce him, The spirit's face just didn't match. While in town to buy storybooks for the spirit, Grace flipped through the records about Su Xian in the bookshop. The favored minister of the late emperor was not the hideous monster that common people thought he was. On the contrary, he had a refined and handsome appearance, and he was proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. However, his temper was capricious and unpredictable, which made him quite unpopular. The late emperor, however, admired his straightforwardness and not only granted him immense power but also imposed almost no restrictions on him. During Su Xian's reign, he levied heavy taxes and extorted wealth. Almost all the ministers had to pay him visits and offer gifts. When he fell from power, the amount of silver and gold confiscated from his home was comparable to the national treasury. But his greatest crime was embezzling military funds and arbitrarily interfering in military affairs, which ultimately led to a disastrous defeat on the front lines. With each fact she read, Grace's heart sank a little more when she saw that Su Xian particularly enjoyed painting and was skilled at depicting landscapes. Her heart plummeted into the abyss. That night, Grace tossed and turned, unable to sleep. What's wrong again? Didn't you get the silver? The spirit tapped his fan handle. It is a bit too little. Otherwise you could take me to sea. He didn't care about the silver. TSK. Forget it. Why do you look like that? Since you're not interested, I'm not going to bother myself. Capricious and unpredictable in addition to being good at painting. He had a bad temper and died of. No, she couldn't think about it anymore. Could it be that she should just ask him directly if he was Su Xian, not to mention his memory loss? Even if he remembered, he probably wouldn't admit it to her. Even if he did, what would she do? He was already dead. Could she really make his soul vanish completely? For the first time in her life, Grace was so troubled by something. Young lady, Grace looked up, and the Taoist priest from that day was standing in front of her again. She tried to turn away, but her path was blocked. Young lady, don't run. This old Taoist really means well. Humans and ghosts are different. You shouldn't have too much contact with ghosts, especially such a malevolent one. He is not. Grace couldn't help but argue. He is not a bad person. The Taoist priest was not surprised. Those are just the tricks ghosts use to deceive you. All they want is to absorb your life force and harm you. Besides, with such malevolence clinging to him, he can't transcend. It would be better if this old Taoist took him in first. It would comfort the souls of those who died by his hand. And second, the image of the spirit's smiling face involuntarily popped into her mind, cheerful, mocking, indifferent, happy, bitter, his almond-shaped eyes opening and closing, curving into a very beautiful shape, the Su Xian in the books. She didn't know him. The only one she knew was the ghost she had picked up, who would take over her bed, but would also draw portraits for her, worry about her being alone, keep her company in the rain, and exchange money for her with calligraphy and paintings. She didn't want to see him disappear. She couldn't do it. I'm sorry, Taoist master. I don't think he's a bad person. The Taoist master hurriedly said. Why are you so stubborn? Young lady, I've already said. He had never wronged her. Even if there were thousands of people in the world who wanted him to vanish, she couldn't. He saved me. If he really wanted to harm me, then I would. The Taoist sighed. What a pity. Grace wanted to say something more. Her words were cut short before they were finished. Her body felt weak, and her consciousness was hazy. Grace stretched out her hand as far as she could, trying to stop it. But it was too late. The last thing she heard before losing consciousness was the Taoist's words. Forgive me, young lady. After waking up, Grace ran frantically towards the thatched cottage where she had lived for so long. The short distance seemed to stretch infinitely, and the fear that had been building in her heart suddenly filled every part of her body. On the bed, he was not there. In the room, he was not there. The old umbrella lay discarded in the courtyard. Silent as if dead, the worst thing she had feared had finally happened. Grace clutched the umbrella and leaned against the wall, feeling her scalp tingle and her limbs grow cold. Hello, are you there? She tried to reassure herself that the spirit had just gone out and hadn't come back yet, but it didn't alleviate even a bit of her anxiety. The moments they had spent together kept replaying in Grace's mind. If you're there, make a sound. He had still been worried about whether she could get back safely. Just make a sound. She hadn't been ready for him to leave. Just one sound. Sob. Crouching down. Grace swallowed her sobs. The spirit had truly disappeared. The Taoist master had disappeared as well. In the days that followed, Grace almost daily ran to her master's grave. But she never saw the spirit again. She searched all the places they had been to together, the town, the restaurant, even the trap on the mountain path, but she still couldn't find him, if it weren't for the few paintings left on the table. It was as if he had never been there at all. At this point, whether he was Su Xian or not no longer mattered. She didn't care at all. Months later, Grace's distant cousin, whom she hadn't contacted for years, sent her a letter, saying that he had made a fortune in Yelyan City and asked her to come and join him. After much thought, Grace decided to leave. Leave this place, to leave this thatched cottage, and to leave this forest. She paid her final respects to her master's grave, carefully weeding around the tombstone and lighting 2 sticks of incense. She knelt in front of the grave for a long time before getting up and leaving. She didn't have many belongings, and the money from selling the paintings was enough to sustain her for a while. After arranging with the boatman to leave early the next morning, Grace went to bed early. Still, she couldn't fall asleep, tossing and turning for half the night before finally dozing off, only to find herself dreaming. The dream was brief. She remembered the person from her memories painting for her and sharing laughter. When she woke up, she could barely recall the details, except for the damp trace at the corner of her eye, which was dried by the wind, leaving a slight chill. In the morning, Grace shouldered her bundle and took one last look at the thatched cottage where she had lived for so many years. She faintly saw a translucent, pure white figure with a mocking expression. Seeing her off, Grace waved her hand. "Is Miss Lu here?" A slightly aged female voice rang out. Seeing the visitor, Grace was slightly stunned, because this was the famous matchmaker from the city, who had dealt with her master several times. After her master passed away, she had never seen this person again. Miss Lu, are you leaving?" "Oh dear, don't go just yet." The matchmaker grabbed Grace's bundle. "Someone has come to propose. This is an extraordinary match. The Li family from Yi City. Have you heard of them? They are a wealthy family with generations of prosperity. Their young master has taken a liking to you. I've brought the betrothal gifts." Quick, bring them in." While Grace was dazed, more than 10 large pear blossom wood chests were carried into the courtyard. Most terrifyingly, she noticed that some chests were left outside because there was no more space. "Wait, what are these?" The chests clanked open, and the bright gleam was dazzling even in the daylight. "How about that, Miss Lu? Not bad, right?" The matchmaker said triumphantly. "And the young master of the Li family is a fine young man, elegant and charming. He's known as the #1 young master in Yi City." "No, there must be some mistake." "There's no mistake. He specifically asked for you." The matchmaker touched the mole on her cheek and continued. "Anyway, with your parents and master gone, a young lady needs someone to rely on. This match is just perfect." Grace was completely frantic. "Wait. I don't. Come, let's set the date. The 5th day of next month is a good day." "I won't marry." Who was she kidding? Even without her parents and master, she couldn't just get married like this. What did you say?" The matchmaker looked surprised, as if she couldn't understand what Grace was saying. "I won't marry." "Oh, it must be the heat today. I must have heard wrong." "You didn't hear wrong. Take all these things out." "I won't." "Who said she won't marry?" A deep yet familiar voice abruptly cut in. Grace's body stiffened. "Who else would you marry if not this young master?" The sound of boots hitting the ground seemed to thump in her heart, each step echoing like thunder in her ears. The noble young master was dressed in a pure white robe embroidered with gold thread. The white jade hairpin on his head shook slightly due to his rough movements, and the folding fan in his hand creaked. Grace felt certain that she was hallucinating. And it was the kind of hallucination that no one would believe even if she told them. She felt a wave of dizziness. And then Grace screamed with all her might. "Didn't you die?" Epilogue. "Hey, when are you going to wake up? Hey, if you don't wake up, I'll tear your house down. No, if you don't wake up, I'll just have someone carry you back to my place." "Are you really not going to get up?" He sighed. Alright, then I'll have to take off your clothes and then. Oh, are you finally willing to wake up? Grace refused to accept reality. What Su Exian? What overwhelming malevolence? What treachery? We're all fake. Who told you I was Su Exian? Grace replied dejectedly. A monk. Do you believe everything a monk says? The monk also said that you are my destined wife for 7 lifetimes. Are you going to marry me right now? Grace. Alright, let's drop this topic and talk about how you became a living person and appeared in front of me. I never died. Ha, the spirit. No, now he should be called the dandy young master. Aaron shook his folding fan leisurely and said, I have always been the first young master of the House of Li in Yi City. Aaron. The previous ghostly state was just an accidental out-of-body experience. Now I have simply returned to my own body. Why did you have an out-of-body experience? Anne, why did you appear in that cemetery? Aaron's face showed a bit of discomfort. Ah, don't ask so many questions. Just rest well. When you come back, marry me. Speaking of which, where does your confidence come from that I will definitely marry you? Why won't you marry me? I asked first. Alright, Aaron struggled for a while. I like you. Ha, you're blushing. Shut up. It took Grace a long time to find out why Aaron was unwilling to tell her about his out-of-body experience. The young master had been saved by her a year ago, although Grace couldn't remember this at all. She occasionally encountered injured passers-by when collecting herbs, and Grace, who had inherited a bit of her master's medical skills, would treat them with the herbs she had on hand. She didn't think it was a significant event, so she naturally didn't make a special effort to remember it, but no matter what, according to the House of Li's steward, it was indeed a real event. Aaron had unfortunately fallen off his horse and off a cliff half a year ago, and was unconscious. It was Grace who saved him. However, at that time, the young master was in such a sorry state that he couldn't be compared with the elegant young nobleman he is now. Grace tried very hard to remember and finally recalled that last year, when she went to pay respects to her master, there seemed to have been such an event. She had wanted to go back to get some more herbs, but when she returned, the person lying on the ground was gone. He was taken away by our people. But afterwards, all the servants and even the old steward were scolded severely. The old steward said because Aaron had fallen in love with Grace at first sight, but they couldn't find Grace no matter what. So within this year, Aaron, whose love was unrequited, became lovesick. Lovesick. Are you serious? Grace's face was full of astonishment. Please do not interrupt the old servant, the old steward said expressionlessly. Finally, a few months ago, somehow Aaron's soul left his body. And then the subsequent developments were what Grace knew. As for why he lingered in that cemetery, it was because Aaron had first encountered Grace there. Speaking of which, why couldn't you find me? Grace thought she was quite easy to find. Because we didn't really look for you, the steward continued expressionlessly. We all thought it was just a nightmare the young master had. Even if we had found you, the madam wouldn't have been too willing to let the young master marry a girl of unknown origin. Ah, then now, why did she agree? If your son is willing to wander around even as a soul for a girl, would you refuse? In the end, it was the dandy young master's summary. How about that? Are you moved by my sincerity? Humph. Don't you quickly submit to me. Grace, I only have one thing to say now. What? Loved? No. Then. You're kidding me. It's worth mentioning that several years later, Grace encountered the monk from that day in Yi City. The monk was grabbing a young girl and saying, the girl has a dark cloud over her forehead and an aura of bad luck. It's not a good sign. She must have encountered someone she shouldn't have. And judging by the shape, it's probably someone who has long since passed away. The line sounded eerily familiar. Aaron immediately had the authorities arrest him. After a few threats, the monk confessed everything. He was nothing more than a charlatan who relied on his silver tongue to deceive people. All that talk about gods and ghosts was basically just to fool people. By the way, the reason he knocked Grace unconscious that day was because he had his eye on the purse at her waist. Aaron, my dear, you're so easy to deceive. You didn't even notice the purse was missing. Grace. Not at all. Damn it. She was too preoccupied with sorrow at the time. Who would have noticed the purse?